Hi, guys. Welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Paige Fullman. Happy New Year. I hope everybody's excited for this surprise episode drop. I am really excited to be putting this out at the first of the year, especially in the wake of the declassification of the social work degree as a professional field, and also just the strain on the social work field in general has been something really troubling to me. I know a lot of social workers, and the guests today are Chante Laliberte-Barnes and Chante Gamby. And Chelsea, I have worked with back in 2024. I worked at an organization that she was running called Illinois Harm Reduction and Recovery Coalition, and she is a social worker that has done so much work in the addiction and recovery space and was just awesome to work for. And I reached out to her and I was like, would you be willing to have a conversation about what is going on in the social work field? And first of all, I think the field of social work is so misunderstood, and even I didn't really understand it. And, you know, I still have questions about it. And I majored in sociology. So many of my peers went on to be social workers, and I still am like, wait, what? Which is so shitty of me, but we'll move on. But the field is just experiencing so much burnout because they're just overstretched and overworked. And, you know, Chante and Chelsea have stories that are absolutely worth listening to. They are women that have made careers out of helping people and making the world a better and safer and more equitable place. And I'm absolutely honored that Chelsea and Chante wanted to come on and speak about their experiences. And as we're moving into the new year and our systems of support are becoming even more strained by the day, hearing from the people that are holding the system up basically by glue and tape needs to be heard and addressed. But first, a little bit about our guests. Chante Gamby is a woman passionate about striving towards social justice by helping others amplify their strengths and live a purposeful life. As a licensed clinical social worker, Chante helps individuals, organizations, and families define their own healing and overcome traumas that may have previously held them back. She believes that we are all on a journey, and if we choose to add healing as part of our journey, we not only heal ourselves, but also the world that we live in. Chante specializes in empowering communities of color to address oppressive systems and attain their own sense of freedom. She has facilitated numerous curated workshops to help individuals live their best life, both personally and professionally, provided trainings and consultation services for organizations looking to improve organizational health from both staff and client-centered perspectives, while also serving as a clinician and administrator in various healthcare organizations. Chante Laliberte-Barnes is a psychotherapist, nonprofit consultant, and policy and advocacy strategist based in the suburbs of Chicago. She co-founded Live for Lali, a harm reduction organization inspired by the loss of her brother to an overdose, along with the Lake County Opioid Initiative and the Illinois Harm Reduction and Recovery Coalition. Over the last 2 decades, Chelsea has worked across sectors at the micro, meso, and macro levels to influence drug policy reform, expand access to mental health treatment, and promote public health approaches to the overdose crisis. She has advised lawmakers, delivered keynote addresses nationwide, and developed transformative legislation and community-based program implementation. Her work emphasizes compassionate, trauma-responsive solutions that uplift dignity, autonomy, and belonging for all. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Chante and Chelsea. Chelsea and Chante, thank you so much for coming on. It is great to have you.
Thanks for having us.
No, of course. So you guys are both social workers. I'm wondering if you can just tell us, what is a social worker? That is a career and a path that a lot of people don't really know. It's a word that covers a lot of things, and it can be a little bit confusing to a lot of people to figure out, what does a social worker do?
Ooh, this is a great way to start this out, because I personally feel that just like every other healthcare professional, but in a different and unique way, people don't know what social workers do. I think people lump social workers into like the whole therapy field, and then they have their own ideas about what that means. But social work at its core is, like, for me, when I decided to become a social worker, it's because I wanted to help people. And I wanted to do that in a number of ways, but really just however I could make a difference or be supportive to somebody in their journey in their life, whether it was like getting basic needs met for them, which is literally like the core of social work, safety, justice, and meeting people where they're at. Like truly, we say this now, we say this idea, meeting people where they're at, but really social workers are supposed to do that. Now, when you
Right.
become a licensed clinical social worker like myself, Chante is also, I'll let her introduce herself, then you can do therapy. But before that, you're getting trained in all sorts of social work tenets, person and environment. What are our core ethics? Our core ethics are about making sure that, like I said, people's safety is uplifted, that we are supporting marginalized communities, that we are working and fighting actively against policies and programs and things that are going on in the world that are harmful to people. And so you can do that in a number of ways, but I think most of the time you see social workers doing a lot of casework, or you think that they might be in a role with DCFS, Department of Child and Family Services, helping children, helping our most vulnerable. But social workers are researchers, they're policy professionals, they're running nonprofits, they're programming, they're developing programs and researching programs. And so I think that is the unique thing about the social work field, different from counseling or psychology or psychiatry or any of the other mental health clinical spaces. I hope that made sense.
It did. News to me that being a licensed clinical social worker meant that you could actually practice. I didn't know what that meant until just now. Not to embarrass myself.
I don't think you're the only one, but Chante, do you want to elab?
Yeah, no, I think there has definitely been a change over the past couple of decades, I would say, in terms of how social workers are viewed. Because previously, yes, there were some clinical social workers who were practicing and doing therapy, but I think predominantly people saw social workers as the ones who worked in the social service sector, the ones who were case managers, the ones who were making sure that people had their basic needs met, and sometimes even, to Chelsea's point, right, working for DCFS, and kind of in government spaces in the background. So I think there has been a shift. I think particularly with COVID, there was a lot more of a need for clinical social workers, and there was more promotion there. So I think it's starting to be seen more as a clinical profession, particularly if you're licensed, but it's fairly new, I think, being seen that way.
So you've both built careers around helping people who are often overlooked or underserved. What first drew you both into this work, and what keeps you in it despite how hard the systems can be that you are working in and around?
In too deep, man. I'm just kidding. No, I mean, like literally, so case in point, like we've been fighting in the state of Illinois for better pay, so that we can focus on providing direct care that's really, really high quality. We're not facing burnout. We're not having to deal with as much of the things that we're dealing with. We're able to expand the field. But if you look at our colleagues in the physical healthcare space, it's not like they're dealing with that. They're dealing with that in a different way. But there's definitely been a lot more investment from a capitalism perspective, but also from a public perspective around how that field developed. And that did not happen with social work. So that actually was very enticing to me when I decided I no longer wanted to be in like the soulless world of advertising, that I wanted to get out and do something, better with my life. And a few years before I made that decision, my brother Alex died from an overdose in our home in Buffalo Grove, which is a suburb that's like 40 minutes outside of Chicago. It's a very, upper middle class, safe space to be. One of the best high schools in the country is there. I mean, it's like, it's a place that you wouldn't be sad to, like, it's not like a place that's awful to grow up in. And yet
Right.
this kid who was so amazing and young and had his whole life ahead of him could not get basic access to resources like treatment and support, and was this issue being so stigmatized, like we didn't even really know he was using heroin. The main intervention that he had was with law enforcement for a public health issue. So to me, as his sister, I'm looking at that thinking, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. And so doing the work of like trying to figure out like why this is the way it is and the war on drugs and where did that come from, and you can talk about that all day, obviously, Paige, because that's how you and I met. But now it's different. Now doing this work, being in communities that are underserved, and also like, for example, like George Floyd, witnessing everything that happened in the public conversation that we have had around privilege and race, and it's changed my life. So I have new reasons for being a social worker. I will never stop being a social worker. I will never stop fighting for social workers. I think it's just sort of molded and changed over time of what I think that means to me. And so, yeah. And then now I have 2 young boys. I have a 6.5-year-old and a 4-month-old. What are we leaving them with? And I think about that every day. So that's me.
Chante, anything to add?
Yeah, so I kind of feel like, I don't know, I was born to be a social worker. It's in my blood. I don't my grandparents on my mother's side were both community leaders. They were pastors, and there was a big idea about serving others, and kind of having a level of justice within the community. Um, Grew up on the South Side, then moved to the South Suburbs, one of the more affluent South Suburbs, and I began to really notice that there wasn't a lot of talk about mental health. There wasn't a lot of talk about why people were experiencing homelessness in particular. And for me, I was just kind of fascinated by that. I've always seen myself as a highly sensitive person. So I just kind of felt like I had a heart for people who were left out, being unseen, and all of that. But when I would talk to my family about it, they'd just be like, well, people have issues. And I was like, okay, but why do they have issues though? And that really fascinated me. And then as a teenager, I found out that one of my family members actually did have a severe mental illness, and we ended up losing our housing, and it was a lot. And I was like, oh, so there really are underlying issues. It's not just that people are born a certain way, people have certain things. Like, there are systemic things that happen to people that can make them go from having a pretty upper middle class lifestyle to almost poverty, right? And being housing insecure. And that really, that left a really big mark on my life. And when I got to college, I was like, well, I'm going to do psychology, right? Because I just need to understand what goes on in people's brains. And one of my professors was like, yeah, you're good at psychology, but you're asking more questions about systems and the intersection of these things on people's identity. And so he really said, you really should think about social work. And I did. And, I've been here since.
I majored in sociology in undergrad, and part of what drew me to that was because I always wanted to know why. Like, why did this thing happen? Why did those people end up that way? Why was this decision on policy made? Like, that's what drew me to sociology. And so many of my peers there went on to become social workers, but that was not my calling personally. But I've always wanted to know the why. Like, that's so integral, I think, to what social work and sociology is why are these things happening? And what can we do to fix it?
Yeah.
You could really spend a lot of time going down a very deep rabbit hole if you don't have some supports, and I think as social workers too, like, that's all we do. We sit and we try to figure out the whys to most of the questions, micro, mezzo, macro. And it's like, you could really turn yourself into a tizzy just doing that, even for 5 minutes. But we need people to be doing that. That's the thing. It's one of the main purposes we serve in our society that is often overlooked and totally undervalued.
Yeah. I mean, Chelsea, didn't I tell you that when I wrote every single college paper on the war on drugs, I've dissected that thing 6 ways to Sunday. Any paper I could make about the war on drugs, I made it about the war on drugs because I asked just a different question that came at it from, whatever way it needed to be came at first said college class. I wrote every single paper about it because I wanted to know everything. I was like, I'm going to beat the horse to death, and then I'm going to beat it again.
And I think that's part of the attraction for some folks as well, right? Like, it's never a dull moment in social work. There's always something more to think about. There's always a different perspective to take. Now, to Chelsea's point, that can get obsessive and maybe not be so great for your mental health, but it also is something that's challenging. And it also, for me, it's like, yeah, I could go probably be in corporate. I could probably use some of these skills elsewhere, but I don't know if I feel like it was making the same impact on my communities.
Right.
So
So
Yeah.
social workers often operate at the intersection of government policy and real people's lives. I actually had a teacher on a few months ago who said that teachers and social workers are often getting just like the bottom of the barrel, like the people that like are slipping through the cracks. They show up at your doorstep and they show up on school teachers' doorsteps.
Yep.
From your perspective, what do people misunderstand about what social workers actually face and do day to day?
Well, it's funny you brought up educators because a lot, I would say probably about 50% of my private practice clients are educators. And they are dealing with the very same things that I see in my 9-to-5 job in administration and social service. So it's fascinating to see that. But I think the most salient misconception about this work is that the government already provides all these resources and that we are just distributing those resources, right? People assume that their taxes are going to feeding the hungry and providing housing. But like in Chicago, no one's wondering then, why are people sleeping on the Blue Line train, right? Like, what they're just like, well, it must once again go back to something's wrong with them because surely our government has provided all these things. And so I think part of it is that people think most of our work is just motivating people to change themselves instead of understanding that a lot of our work is making a broken system work and finding creative ways to give resources to people who have been severely impacted by that broken system. There isn't that safety net that people think there is.
Right.
And to your point too, and so it's such a great example. Like, take a look at what's going on in Chicago, right? I mean, before ICE was here, Brandon Johnson, our mayor, and the Chicago Department of Public Health and everything that he has tried to reform was very focused on making sure that public safety looked differently, looked what the community needed it to look like. One of those reasons is probably because Brandon Johnson was a teacher, a former public school teacher who became mayor, and he's done so much with that. And I think I bring that up just to sort of draw a conclusion here. It's not for lack of, I think you're seeing gun violence go down. You're seeing drug deaths go down. You're seeing housing issues being tackled differently. You're seeing so many of these issues because of the people who are advocating. And when the people who are advocating are the ones who are most impacted and they are the end user, or they are the ones who are invited to the table because the person who's in charge is inviting them to the table because they know how important their voice is, then you get a different dichotomy. Then you get a situation where our federal government is sending ICE agents into Chicago, and we continue to make the case over and over again about why they don't need to be there, because they don't. And one of the reasons is because of how Chicago is responding to this issue, led many cases by and for and with teachers and social workers. We don't have extra hours in the day. We're not making extra money for this. We just know it needs to happen, whatever that it is. And so it is an interesting dichotomy you just drew there, Paige, between the two fields and really what we do. And it's funny too, also, I'll make this really quick, because a lot of the teachers, like, for example, in my son's public school system, they are often like, okay, so I've got a kid who's got behavioral issues. I introduce them to the social worker at the school, and the social worker can only do this thing at this hour in this amount of time. But then I have to send them to a social worker outside of the school system. And I really need a specific type who speaks Spanish and who understands certain types of trauma disorders. Like, where are they? They don't really exist in droves. So I think, yes. I don't know where I was going with that, but I think you get it. it's just one big hamster wheel that is so critical and so crucial to the fabric of our communities and the fabric of our society, but is sorely, sorely misinterpreted and misunderstood and underlooked. I'm just going to keep saying that over and over again.
Well, it's, again, I am the bad person, but like when like I said, I majored in sociology. A lot of my peers, when we would take like the core sociology classes, they would ask the question like, what do you want to do when you graduate? And they'd say social, like, I want to be a social worker. And I'd go, oh, okay. So they like want to go work for DCFS. Like that was the only thing that my mind could comprehend as what they would go on to do. Then I had a cousin who got a master's in social work and now works as a fundraiser at a private school in the city.
Mhm.
I was like, wait a minute. I can't square these circles. Like, I don't understand what social workers do. And then I met Chelsea and I was like, okay, this is this is three different things and I'm trying to square these. It took me until a couple of years ago to be like, okay, social workers are everything. Like they can do a whole bunch of different things. And today I just learned that an LCSW means you can clinically practice. Like it really is everything. And like you just said, it is holding the fabric of our society and our communities together. That's what it is.
In many ways. Yeah. And then like, just to dig in on that, you said your friend became a fundraiser for a school.
Yes.
Okay. So then somebody out there might be asking, oh, like what skills of social work could have contributed to something like that? And I think you want to know who knows more about grants than anybody else out there? It's us. Because we have to fund our work.
Yeah, well,
We have
that's
to
what she
spend
does a
time,
lot
right?
of. She does a lot of grant writing.
And to Chelsea's point, right, at the end of the day, we're one of the strongest sellers, right? Because we have to fund our work. If I don't know how to sell, I might not have a job. So
We are really, really, really good salespeople. We are good at sales because we know how to read people and we understand the psychology of messaging and marketing. We could do so many things and crush so many industries, and nobody is giving us a chance. Just saying.
God. So let's move on to more kind of policy focused questions. Nowadays, in the last, let's say, what is it, November? 11 months, we've heard politicians, especially in this administration, tie the fentanyl crisis to the border. From where you sit, what is actually driving the crisis, and what do people and politicians get wrong about it consistently?
Chante, do you have a burning desire
go
to
ahead,
take this
Chelsea.
one?
I know this is your jam, so go for it.
Okay, let's just get one thing straight here, okay? There is nothing this administration wants to do to fix the fentanyl crisis, okay? That's not what they're doing. They want more supporters, they want more money, they want to play to their base, they want to win elections. That's it. They've demonstrated that they really don't care very much about the common person who's struggling with potentially a fentanyl use disorder. They just want to say that they did something about it. Quote me, okay? That's it. That's the game. That's politics. Now, there are administrations who do what this administration is saying that they're going to do, which is we're going to close the border, and we're going to do that with the wall and with ICE and with all these things to keep the bad people out, to keep the fentanyl dealers out. They've already been here. They're already here. They're coming through the mail. They're your next door neighbor. They're making stuff in the lab. The gang affiliates, the gangs in Chicago are already like really in on it. Like we've got the whole system going. There's nothing that was going to happen. Yes, I think we can really get into the weeds page if you want to, like, where does the fentanyl come from? You can make it in your house. Okay. It's like, have you ever seen Breaking Bad?
Right.
So anyways, like the issue here is and has always been that you have to know when you're being sold a lie. And I think that that's a big part of what this is all about. If they really wanted to do something about the fentanyl crisis, they would ask why.
Social workers
who would ask why and who already know why.
Right.
And we would get to the root of it. We would try to keep people out of poverty. We would make sure they had a home. We would make sure they had access to clean using supplies because people going to use. People are going to pee, poop, use, eat, sleep, have sex, need sunlight. It's all a part of the human condition. Why aren't we talking about the root causes of this crisis? And that's the problem, is that if they really, like, whenever a politician sells you something, ask them, is that really what's going to, is the goal here to change, or is the goal here to, what's the goal here? And just remember, they're always trying to sell you on something. So we already know how to end the fentanyl crisis. We're not doing it.
Right.
Well, let me actually take that back. And then Chante, I'm going to hand it over. We were starting to do a lot with it. And some cities and states are really committing in new and unique ways to it. But you have to see that the fentanyl crisis came from the drug war. The drug war came from racism. Racism came from the building of this country. That came from control and power. I mean, like, go back all the way in time. It's like really, it's like a story we hear over and over again. Just put something new in it. Gun violence. You just put a new thing in it.
Choose your social issue.
Choose your social issue, and it all goes back to people wanting to get more power and control, getting those things, to not focus on the root causes. Okay, I'm going to be quiet. Chante, go.
I mean, Chelsea, I don't know if you saw my notes or what, because that's half of what I was.
Is that what you said? Okay. Well,
no, but that's
baby.
I think you're really drawing at the point, right? Like, we always have a different social issue historically that I think some politicians use to sidestep accountability. To your point, at the end of the day, if people had their basic needs met, some people would still use sure. Would it be at the same rate? I highly doubt it, because we would be addressing structural issues. I also think we have to keep in mind here that drug business is big money. And we don't really ask who benefits from that. They want to say, oh, it's the folks overseas that benefit from that. No, it's people in our country. It's the very folks who are making policies sometimes who are benefiting from that. And I think that's kind of the part where, of course, the government's not going to talk about that, because that makes them look like they're not doing what they're supposed to do, and they're profiting off of it, profiting off of people dying. I do think, I agree with Chelsea. We could have solved this. We could have solved this. We could have solved the war on drugs. Like, this could have been addressed, but people used it to benefit themselves. And it was at the expense of people who were trying to survive.
Right. Well, and how does messaging like that's saying, oh, it's the border's fault, or, you know, those people are using because they're bad people, or those people are using because they come from bad families. How does that rhetoric impact the work that you are doing on the ground?
It makes it 9,000 times harder, because that's now become the focus of how we address problems. The focus becomes whatever the politicians that you have, you know, confirmation bias is powerful, right? If you are subjected to, or if you are aligning with MAGA or the Republican Party or conservative, whatever they tell you conservative political values are, you are going to try and find a way to believe the thing that you're connected to, just like I do as a Democrat. So, I mean, I think we can all learn from our own experience of being sold an idea that really didn't end up working out in the end. I'll give you another great example, is the economy. Like, we're all sitting here, right? It is harder to afford to live than it was at any other time. Even in the 2008 crisis. I mean, I know that we've had other examples of like how this has been awful, but we have a major affordability crisis in this country. We were promised a way out, right? We were promised that the tariffs were going to solve everything. The other lady, Madam Vice President, she actually had like a verified plan that like actually made sense and was very power with oriented, was verified by Wall Street. Like, we had like so many people who were like, yes, you know, like social workers, we were like, yes, this seems better. And we all knew, I think I speak for myself here, but once push came to shove, none of it was going to be about what they were going to do. It was always going to be about what they weren't going to do, and hanging out at Mar-a-Lago and going on golfing trips and hanging out and calling people piggy and things like that. That is what they want to do. That's what they now want to focus on. So, I mean, I know I just got off on a tangent there, but I think the point is, you know what it's like to be sold a car that was a lemon, right? we're in it now. We're in it now. The reason I love McDonald's so much is because I get it in my face all the time and it smells really good when I drive by. Okay. That's marketing. Okay.
Right.
It's the same concepts. So yeah, I mean, I'm just going to stop there. I'm so angry. I can't. I'm just.
I mean, to your point about McDonald's, right? We have been socialized a certain way, and politicians know that. They know that there's a certain narrative that if we just keep saying that certain people can rise above it because they have, something internal that other people don't, then we don't have to address the fact that we are all quite vulnerable. Now, there are varying levels to that, but most Americans are vulnerable. When we look at affordability and housing, right? So many Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. A lot of them are a couple paychecks away from losing their own housing, but yet they are so different from the folks who are currently experiencing homelessness. It's not that we as people are different. We have a shared humanity. It's that we buy into a narrative of, we are different, and therefore it's not about making sure everybody has enough. It's, you need to figure it out. And if you don't, that's your fault. And that's what some politicians like to play that game of. It's just, they're just bad. They're not okay. And that's not our fault. We can't do anything about that. But if you can rise above it, then you'll be okay. And that's not what we've seen.
I think I've talked about this before, but there's so many people that just do not realize that they are so close to losing their housing, and they are more likely to lose their housing in their lifetime than they are to ever be a millionaire or a billionaire.
Yep.
And part of that, now thinking about what we've said about the marketing and the conditioning of these politicians that they've done to us, it's all tied into that. Mm-hmm. People are so conditioned to want to punch below to the person that they perceive as being below them that they aren't going to blame, the systems and the actual reasons behind why things like this exist.
Yeah. Case in point, I was listening to somebody, probably on TikTok, but they were going on about the fact that they were like, I'm a single mom and I struggled. And, if people aren't getting their benefits, that's too bad for them. And I was really concerned by that because I was like, as another human being, are we really okay with letting another person starve? No matter where you sit politically, why do we think that's okay? And I think a lot of that is we've really been conditioned to think that we are somehow different from one another.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or there are people like Lauren Boebert who would tout about how she benefited from things like food stamps, and then she would actively vote to close the door behind her effectively and say, well, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. Why can't you do that? Stuff like that will never cease to amaze me, because how you could benefit from these systems that we have that are good, broken, but they are good systems to have in place, how you could experience those and then go, well, screw everybody else. That was great for me, and everybody else, kick rocks. Sorry, you can't get it. I will never understand that.
I think that a lot of this goes to our base nature too. I mean, I think a lot of people, we want to believe that people are inherently good. I do. I think I'm inherently good, but I have some thoughts that are not nice, But I think it also just comes down to our values, and we get swayed really easily sometimes when we are in a jam. And unfortunately, with everything we're talking about, it has come down to the fact that we are very much a culture, and just humans in general want to think about things in black and white terms. We don't want to sit in the gray. Guess who sits in the gray? Social workers. We sit in the gray constantly. And that's why we're not afraid to take the long way round the mountain, because that's the right way to solve a social problem. Instead, we have now far left, far right. I mean, literally, we just elected, not me, but the country just elected Trump, and then
not me either.
Later, not me.
I was not part of it either.
Yeah, no, not me. But then months later, not even a year later, we elect Zohran Mamdani as the mayor of New York City. And there couldn't be somebody more opposite of Donald Trump than that person. And now what are the politicians in Washington doing? They're focused on how do we message socialism as the thing that you should fear next. When what social workers know is that there's a middle ground. There's a middle ground.
Right.
There's great ideas that people on the right have suggested and the left, and there's middle ground. And we have to just figure out a way to be in that space. And that is not something that people have the patience to do, want to do. And also we have a 24-hour news cycle. We have social media that's telling us, up, next thing, let's go, let's move. So unless you really want to dig in and get the right candidates in there who are courageous and like some of the ones you've interviewed, Paige, like the Kevin Ryans of the world, who I find to be really a fascinating person because he wants to go in and do the work and actually change and reform the systems. Like literally, that's why he's running. Unless we start learning about those candidates and unless there's a better pathway for them to actually be able to get elected, and we take a look at this whole system in terms of like, how can we make it better and use critical thinking? I don't think much is going to change. Right. And so that's really dismal. I know that sounds really sad and like, you know, dystopian or whatever, but let's be real about what's going on.
Right. Right. And in your world, in your ideal utopian world, say somebody waves a magic wand and they say, Chelsea and Chante, like this, you get to choose. What would the real evidence-based public health response to the fentanyl crisis look like? If you had the magic wand and you got to just sprinkle and it's in effect, what would it be?
Okay, well, first of all, there would be no fentanyl crisis if my plan were in place. There would be fentanyl. We would be back to heroin, right? Like we'd be like, bring back heroin. Like we'd be able to do that. Because, and I don't mean that in a joking way, I really mean that in a real way. Like heroin's much safer than fentanyl is to use. So we at least we're starting to understand a lot of the reasons that street drugs were showing up in the way that they were when heroin was a part of the equation. And then the Mexican drug cartels really did what they do, which is sell stuff that keeps people hooked. And then we have this now, right? So it's out of control. But anyways, I think it would look like community care. I mean, I think it would be a very holistic system where you wouldn't have to just constantly feel like you had to sell your soul or your body or your family up a river to get access to services. Like it was just available and accessible to you. So I'm a person who very much believes in universal systems and universal healthcare access. I think having universal everything, socialized systems, which we do have some of, but not in mass, not in the ways that this really needs to look, to where whether it was a person who literally just needed food, they knew exactly where to go to get that, and there wasn't a constant threat of that being taken away from you. I think that would help. Utopian is so hard to think about, Paige, because it's like that's just like not like the reality that we live in. But we wouldn't have to fight so hard, I think, just to be able to make it through each and every single day. I think that's a place we have to come to. I think in reality, public and private entities can and should be working together. There are other countries out there who do this way better and differently than we do, and we need to be looking at those models. One of them, for example, is Portugal. Portugal has found a way to link up capitalism with socialism and create systems that actually work for people for a variety of health issues. You just certainly don't see the same rates of HIV and AIDS, addiction, on people who are unhoused. It's not that they don't exist. Of course they exist in some way. But they're more set up so that if there is a chance that somebody might need something like human beings should want to do for others, that you can get that thing. Anyways, that's my answer. It's not great, but anyways, go ahead, Chante.
How do I make this short?
I know it's hard.
I think. Oh my goodness! So first off, we wouldn't have the American version of capitalism if we had to have capitalism. That's one thing. We wouldn't be so afraid of socialism, and understanding that once again, there's complexities to any kind of philosophy around how folks should be governed. I think from just kind of a social justice perspective, there would be an acknowledgement of the fact that resources have not been evenly distributed, and there would be retribution there, right? There would be, we did not all start on the same footing, and therefore we need to make sure that people who have continued to be in cycles of poverty due to racism, due to all sorts of other things that this country has done for generations, that is addressed. Yeah, I think that would be a good way. And then I think, because I get on the social workers all the time too, including myself, but I think also for us, it would be going back to, we can't be everything for everybody. I think that's also another misconception. Social workers aren't going to solve this issue. It is going to be what Chelsea said. We need to have community care. And when you have community care, when you know who your people in your community are, there's also a level of access to resources that maybe we wouldn't have if we were just relying on one profession or two professions to do the work. And there would also be a level of accountability as well, because I do think sometimes some social workers go on the other end of, well, people should just be able to do whatever they want to do. I don't personally agree with that. I think, yes, you have the rights. And if we're in community, we have to hold each other accountable, right? Because we want our community to be well. I also think we would have time as a profession to really do person-centered work. I don't think we do that very well as a large system. I think we say, we're going to kind of latch on to one philosophy, and we're going to try to see if we can make that work for as many people. And while we all have the same needs, we are all different too. I just don't think as social workers, we actually have the time often to really assess for individuality and then determine where those resources are. But I think with community care, you have more of that opportunity.
And can one of you elaborate on what community care looks like?
I think we probably both can in our own unique ways. I mean, I think when I think of community care, I think about mutual aid. I think about knowing that that instead of just solely relying on yourself to figure out how you get all the things you need to accomplish in one given day, that you actually can and must, because of the way a community care based society would work, be willing to reach out to other people and say, hey, does anybody have a resource for this? Or would anybody be able, like, for example, I've got a group of moms that I am in community care with, and we're trying to do this differently here in my own community. Does anybody know, is anybody able on this day to pick up my son from school and take him here? And that idea is like so antithetical to how we as Americans view how we should be living our lives. Oh, you've got to do it for yourself. Don't bother other people. Don't bother other people, because who's going to really want to help you out? What if they've got stuff to do? That's rude. Don't do that. Like, you know, what are all the messages? Like, what is that? Like, there's so much stigma behind this idea that we could be in community together. But what we've forgotten is that there have been many, many, many societies all throughout history that based the reason that they've survived for so long in community care. And many of those societies were built and driven by women, which I think is the key to all of this. Look at who is kicking ICE out of communities. It's women. It's women. It's mothers. It's teachers who are women. It's men too, but it's being led by women right now. Let's just face the facts here. So it's saying, I want something better for myself and my family. And I want that to happen in a more cohesive way. And I think you can start in small steps with that. Like, maybe it's like, for example, this Thanksgiving week, we were all off of school. So the moms in the classroom decided, I'm just going to offer my house from 9 to 12 on Monday. If you want to bring your kids over for a few hours because you have to work or go take your son to the doctor or whatever it is, you can do that. And so a few of the moms offered to do that, and they offered to do it during the winter break. That's community care. That's me trying in my own little way, in my own little corner of the world, just to do it in the way that I think would be most helpful for other people, as they've expressed to me. So I don't know. That really wasn't like an official definition. That was my.
I was just wondering about the way you guys interpreted it. You both used it, and I was like, okay, wait, elaborate.
Chante, what does it look like for you?
I think that was a beautiful definition of it, right? It's we see each other and we say, okay, like you said with the moms, right? We know some people are going to be working, right? So what can I do? What can I offer? We've seen this. I mean, we were talking about indigenous folk, right? Like for generations, different cultures have done this. It's just the understanding that I do not exist without you. And therefore, we all have something to contribute. So everyone determines what they can contribute and they commit to doing that for one another and don't rely on that an external factor to do those things, such as the government, right? Because we know even if the government wants to, and this is from someone who works in the government, it takes a very long time to do it. And sometimes it's not nearly enough versus if we had smaller communities saying, this is what we can contribute here. We can still have government pouring in as well. But at the end of the day, it's saying, I see you, I see myself. This is what I can offer you. I'm sure you can offer something to the community and we will figure out everything from there.
Right.
And there have been parts of our society, though, that have been doing community care for a really long time. I mean, I'll give you an example. Literally, people who use drugs have been in community together for a really long time.
That's true.
Because they know. So who are the people that end up reversing overdoses the most? It's people who use drugs. Because they know that for them to survive, as you just said, that was so mic drop, Chante. As you said, I need you to function. Or you said something like that. Like, to be me, I need you. And that's what they know and have known and have not relied on the government in any way, shape, or form because they've been their oppressor for so long and not seen them as people. And I think we see this in other different sects of populations as well, including the Black community, including LGBTQ folks. What I think would be so great is if there was some function of the government that could provide for that support, but not tell us how to do it and then come in and do it for us. That's what like the ideal community care could look like. Like, here's the money. We trust you to use it. Here's the services. Right. We trust you to use those. Now we're going to go.
I think the trust is key though, right? Because like working in government right now, we're trying to find all these mutual aid organizations and they don't really want to talk to us. They don't exist. The ones that do exist do not want to deal with us because they're like, and I get it. They're like, we'll say we're going to partner with you. And what will happen is you all will tell us what we're going to do and act like we don't know what our community needs. And we haven't been doing this forever. And so I think there has to also be that rebuilding of trust and accountability in order to do that. But I totally agree with you, Chelsea.
So we touched on this briefly, but it can be very overwhelming to work in the spaces that you're working in. And there's a lot of burnout in your field. How you don't just have to speak to your experience. You can speak to, just what you know from in and around the social worker community. How do social workers balance compassion with that feeling of burnout when it feels like you are upholding systems that often feel and look like they are kind of collapsing in on you?
Oh my gosh. That's such a good question. It's so hard to answer. Okay, so I'll just speak for myself. I have an innate need to do this work. So there's not much that drives me other than just knowing that there's this, that this is my place in the world. And if somebody asks me for something, it is in my nature to want to help them. It does not take that much for me as a person to want to go out and, pick up some whistles for the local immigration aid agency. I think in general, though, as you become more skilled as a social worker, as you do more work in the field, as you get hopefully good and really quality supervision, which doesn't always happen, as you learn as a human through that process, because I don't know one social worker who hasn't had to go through their own personal journey of healing. And if you're not, maybe you should look at that. Oh my God. I don't know. Sorry, don't mean to sound judgy, but I don't know how you can't, how when you're looking at a person who's struggling with an issue that you may or may not be and think, maybe I should take a look at that, and then taking the steps to go and take a look at that. I have a therapist who has a therapist who has a therapist. I have supervision in my life, and I don't need, technically, according to the rules, I don't need one, but I have one because I need that. I need supervision. I need a space to air things out of. I have my own community care within my social work community. Like, I know if I needed to ask a question, I could call Chante, and Chante would be there. And it maybe not in that second, but when she could find some time, you know. But the truth of the matter is, the field was not designed to be reflective of the needs that we have in order to provide the service that we have. And you see that in all the other healthcare fields, you see that in teaching. And ironically, if you were around last week, you saw what the Department of Education did when they called our profession no longer a profession, amongst many other professions that are literally lifting up the entire country right now, so that these people can't get loans in order to go to school, in order to get a higher education, to be able to get to the level of providing services that we are. Like, that's going to dramatically change the way that services are provided. We didn't need that, right? So if we are in the middle of trying to reform our own field and from the inside out, and now we've got this other thing that we just keep, it's like walking up a mountain in the middle of a dust storm. Can't see, you can't, you know, you're tired, nobody's helping you, and you just got a little stick and you're like trying to like make it up, you know. It's not built into, just like most of the systems of chronic care, they're chronic for a reason. So that's what's happening too in the social work field. And so I think in order to get out of it, we first have to acknowledge that it's happening. And most people out there who aren't in the social work field don't know that it's happening. And I think that that's, you know, but then they'll ask, oh, why can't I find a social worker? Why can't I find a mental health professional? How much time do you have? Because this field was never designed to be available in mass in the way that it's needed.
Right.
Oh man. Always going up behind you, Chelsea. It's so hard.
What? No. I feel bad now. Okay.
I'm joking. So my therapist calls me a true social worker, and she's a social worker, right? But I think part of it is she's like, no matter what, you keep going. And I have had to struggle with that. I have had to take moments and say, sometimes though, I need to be able to lay down this burden, because there is so much pressure on social workers to solve so many social ailments and so many systemic issues that are bigger than us. And so I think it's important to be compassionate towards, you know, our clients and each other. It's also important to be compassionate towards ourselves. I try to focus on the impact that I'm seeing with my clients, you know, and seeing how they're able to move forward. But it's hard, because I also work in government, and it's very difficult, because I'm like, if we could just fix this in the system, this would make all of our jobs so much easier. But we can't right now. And so I have to hold that I can still be effective, and I can still be a support to my clients, and I can still advocate for a better system. I think social workers who are in leadership positions and have a level of influence also have a greater responsibility to that as well. You can't just say, oh, we'll take a mental health day to your staff. No. I think one thing, and I know we don't have time to really go into this, is a lot of people lately have gone into getting licensed and becoming clinical social workers because they know they can get paid better versus doing case management work. The work is not better. It's all very important. But we do not value case management and all the other things at the same level that we value therapy. And my thing is, if I can help you meet your basic needs, that's part of therapy. You know? And so I think those who are in positions of power need to be able to say, okay, I have a great team. I have people who are very compassionate, and I don't want them to burn out. So what I'm going to do is everything within my power to make sure that their needs are met. It doesn't make sense that as a case manager, when I did it, I could not afford gas to go see my clients. And that was not unique to me. There are a lot of
Right.
social workers that struggle with that. So I think we have to say, yes, we love that we can be compassionate, but as individuals, we need to say, okay, what is it within my sphere of influence? What can I do to change things? And for those things that I cannot, I have to learn to advocate, but also balance and keep in mind all the other things, all like Chelsea said, my community, my communities, right? Um, and that life is bigger. I am a social worker, but I'm also so many other things as well.
Right. Right. Well, and when you're
Yeah.
in those moments that are feeling like, like I can't change this, like the system just feels impossible to change. Like I am but one person. Where do you still find the hope and motivation to keep going and keep pushing for more change?
Gosh, I think everybody has a different answer for that. Everybody's motivations are so different. But I don't know. I'm feeling like there's a lot of really amazing things happening at the local level that I think a lot of people forget about. Like when we think about elections, we think about the presidential election, the gubernatorial election. I'm like, what are you doing in your own community where there is a need, right?
Mhm.
Like local government is almost like overwhelmingly ignored. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, I just want to blame the state for the property tax issue, or I just want to, you know, it actually starts in your local villages and your local townships and your local
Mhm.
Right.
municipalities, whatever that is. Maybe it's a group that needs to meet. Like, for example, we just created the liberal moms of the Northwest suburbs. Okay.
Oh,
Love
snap.
it.
Say it loud, say it proud, don't be afraid, right? Like, and all of a sudden, and it was just a few of us women who were like, I just need community right now. And now we've grown, and there's like literally, we've only been doing this for under a month, and there's like 150 women who are about to meet and discuss what are we going to be doing about this. But in that time, there was an ICE raid on a street near a school that we were able to respond to, that we were able to go to a village council meeting to rise up against what's interesting enough, and I promise I will not go on like a huge tangent with this, is I live in a community where 1 in 5 people is Hispanic, where more than 50% are women, and where there is a huge and rising number of children and elderly. And the entire village council is white men who are in their 50s. And I'm not afraid of that. I think they're afraid of a bunch of white liberal women yelling at them and making their lives, like making them look like they don't care, maybe because we remind them of their wives. I'm not sure. But we organized village council meeting, pop-ins where we can like provide public comment and like really get them to do something, write a resolution, make an ordinance, say something, do something. Your community doesn't feel safe. Respond to that. Like respond to what they're asking you. We just want to feel safer and more trusting. And so there are things locally you can do. There are things I think in your church that you can do, your religious community, your school. I mean, there's a lot of hope in smaller places that you don't think about. There's a lot of hope in our kids. There's a lot of hope in just what's right in front of your face. So I think we have to hold on to that and find the place that you fit. Find the thing that you're passionate about and go and participate in that thing. You don't always need to be leading. You don't always need to be helping. Maybe you're just there
Right.
to take notes. That's helping.
Right. Right.
No one ever wants to take notes.
No, I'm just going to use my app that take notes for us.
Right.
Oh man. I agree with Chelsea about, the fact that at the end of the day, local government, there's so much that you can do there. We're talking about sphere of influence. I didn't even know that my community had a whole housing department that was looking at housing affordability. And the only reason I found out is because I met someone on the city council who was like, oh, you work in housing. Let me tell you about this. So I think our local governments need to also reach out to their constituents more and raise awareness. But I do think people do have a lot more influence than trying to go state, federal, all that.
Right.
Still important, but really understanding what your community is already doing and letting them know what you want to see done
Right.
is really
Absolutely.
important. I would also say for me, I find it in my own faith. I find it within the clients that I see. I find it from my ancestors who kept moving forward. And I find it from my staff. I find it from the people that are continuing to do the work. And I say, well, hey, if they continue to fight, I got to keep going too. Right. So, I think there's so much. There's so many spaces for inspiration and motivation, but I think you have to figure out what's most important to you and how do you plug in? And then who can you be in community with around that?
Right. Right. Chante, your work intersects with social justice. How, in your opinion, can we reframe addiction, poverty, crime, the housing crisis as policy failures instead of moral failures?
Yeah, so social justice is kind of one of those terms that I think is similar to like harm reduction, right? Everyone has an idea of what it means, and it can be variant. So I think, though, we have to acknowledge that our justice system rarely achieves any justice. So
Right.
we have to have that acknowledgement piece.
Right.
And then we can start talking about the things underneath that, right? We incarcerate people for not having a place to call home. And then we compound that punishment for people who are just trying to survive. So I think going back to what we talked about a while ago, right? Like at the end of the day, if we had policies that addressed certain things rather than punishing people, that said, how do we prevent things rather than being so reactive? I think that's the way we reflect it. We reframe it. We say, why are people experiencing these things? And then what interventions can we put in place so that maybe less people experience those things
Right.
versus where are we going to put people now that this has happened? We need to ask that question. I think Oprah talked about this, right? What happened to you, right? That's a trauma thing. What actually happened to you versus, well, is this just who you are? And how do we prevent this from happening again?
That's an interesting. I've never heard. I didn't hear that. I didn't hear Oprah say that, but that's an interesting one.
She
I'm
was
gonna have to think
probably
about that
quoting
one.
a philosopher, but I think it was somebody that was talking about
Yeah.
trauma-informed work, right? It's
Yeah,
about
yeah,
what
yeah.
happened to you.
Right.
Well, I love what you said. I just want to say something about this. Like, we have been asking the wrong questions for decades. We've been asking the questions that the people in charge want to ask because of whatever their means to an end are.
Right.
And that hasn't gone so great, especially lately. So I think that is such an amazing point, Chante. Like, we are all asking the wrong questions instead of assuming that something is going to happen, assuming it already has. It already has.
Right.
And it already is going to. So plan and prepare better. My God. Okay.
Exactly.
Oh my God, I think this recording's gonna send Chelsea into a stroke. Oh my goodness.
Oh no! I'm just naturally angry. You know that.
That's your baseline.
Yes.
All right. Well, Chelsea, you spoke to me in my DMs about how the government's hypocrisy in using families affected by addiction for political gain. How do we shift that narrative from one of exploitation to one of accountability?
Oh. Yeah. Well, let's just hold them accountable right now, Paige. I mean, one of the most gross things that I saw ever was when Trump did like his State of the Union one time, and he brought up a family whose child died from a fentanyl overdose. And literally he brought them, and then like the camera zooms on them, and it's like we all take a moment to like realize like, oh, this person lost their child, and that's really sad, to an overdose. But then somehow equates that to the border crisis and why we need tighter borders, even though like they had like a great policy frame in place that just never went because he told his own party not to vote for it or support it anymore because he was afraid Kamala Harris was going to win, blah, 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 blah. So what I think it's gross, first of all, anytime politicians anywhere from any party use families as a reason to just sound good, to something that's much smaller than really like the much bigger like frame that we actually need to zoom out on all of this. I think for the addiction crisis, it's been really an interesting journey. And I think the trouble we get into when we use families around this is we stop giving them autonomy to tell their stories. We stop giving them the dignity to send the message that they want to send. And then we start placating to political talking points that actually don't have anything to do with the thing that we need to get done. I'll give you an example. There is a subsection of people who have lost someone to an overdose that only care about drug-induced homicide policies. Drug-induced homicide is basically like, you gave my child the drugs, or you were using together, or you were somehow involved in the equation where a child overdosed and died, and now you need to go to jail for 6 to 30 years so that we can have justice. Now, there's like a subsection of moms who like really think that's the only answer to the problem. Like, we just got to get that person who hurt you, right? Even though they didn't really hurt you. Right. We got to get them behind bars, and then maybe that'll make me feel better a little bit because it'll be justice for your child. I know what that anger is. I've seen my mom, profoundly distressed, and her helping other moms in profound distress because of this. I have too. But if you spend time actually looking at the roots of the issue, that thing that happened to you, where that person ended up being a part of the equation where you lost your child, that's not where it started. It didn't start there. But that's the thing that people are holding on to because they're angry. And I think that if they were able to see past that anger and actually look to the roots of and have a broader picture to the story, we would be in a much different place. But unfortunately, every time politicians are going to take that narrative and run with it if they can then justify whatever they're trying to do to placate to their base.
Right.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for if this is news to people, but that is exactly what is happening. And it happens every single day with every other public health issue. So I hate to just summarize it with it's gross, Paige, but that's exactly what it is. It's gross. And if you are hearing something and you're watching the news or you're watching a politician talk and it feels like they're using somebody to make a point, you're probably right.
Right. Well, I'm always
sorry
found it
that I'm not sorry.
Well, right. No, and I get it. Like I think a lot about like Lake and Riley. That name is like burned in my head because she was murdered in Georgia, and they threw around that poor girl's name for months and months and months. And I understand that like her family was somewhat on board. And for a while I was like, am I the bad person that like I want them to just stop using her name as this like, post that's holding up all these like other nasty things? There's like, why would you defile her like that? Like she's deceased, like in a horrible, gruesome way. I don't think we need to make it any worse. And it like whenever politicians do stuff like that, it grinds my freaking gears. Because if you can't stand on your own policy without making people feel emotional by using some people or a family or whatever it is, your policy probably isn't that good. Sorry, it's probably not that good if you can't get it through without appealing to people's emotions. Sorry. Like I don't know what to tell you. Like I hate it.
You're right, Paige.
I mean, I feel there were so many mic drops here. I mean, I don't think I have anything else here. I mean, that's
I'm gonna have to add in like the sound effect that's like
that would be awesome. Yeah, but I think it comes down to we as people need to look carefully around what's happening in our communities, and also what messaging techniques the people that we put in positions of power are using. At the end of the day, like you were saying, Paige, people have been used as pawns. There's always an opportunity to use people to get your message across a certain way. But we have to think critically and say, is that really true? How does that actually connect? And if we don't know if it's true, then, we need to be in community with social workers and educators and other people, right?
Right.
to fact check some of this mess, because we're far smarter than these narratives that we're just given.
All right. One last question for you guys before we head out. the world can be overwhelming. A lot of people, I'm sure all three of us included, watch the news and just feel like we want to beat our heads against the wall, and it just feels like nothing can possibly go right. Social problems just seem so big and looming, and where should people start if they are trying to, they're not a social worker, say, they just are somebody that wants to try to be a part of the solution? Where should they start?
Okay. Start with yourself. Understand what you have accepted as truth and explore why you have accepted that. Plug for social workers, right? Or any therapist, right? Part of the work is really just examining those narratives that you've had and how they've impacted your life. And I think the other part of that is knowing yourself to know, okay, these are the things that I feel like are a problem in my community. And then you can go to, well, where do I start? Where can I learn more about this topic? That's a step. If I already know certain things about the topic, can I, like we've already said, right, learn what's happening in my local community, the local government? I think, and sometimes it's not even doing anything big. Sometimes it's even just, can I ask my neighbor what they need? Those things, those things that we see as insignificant, if we were all doing those things over time, would have a huge impact. And it would also change the narrative around who deserves what. So I would recommend that all of us start with ourselves, examine yourself, understand your biases, understand all of those different things, not to beat yourself up, but to say, okay, I'm aware of where I'm coming from. I also know what I can bring to the table. And I also know that I'm capable of learning what I don't know. And start with that.
Absolutely.
Such a social work answer. I love it. It's so important that you said that. So I'm going to say all of that plus. So like for me, I'm a person of faith. Like I have a very strong faith. Apparently you're not allowed to talk about anymore, which I think is actually really sad. And I think that one way that you can actually execute what Chante is talking about is actually taking the principles of your faith, your values, your norms that you're setting in your own life, in your own family, and say, does this thing that I am wanting to do, wanting to say, wanting to exhibit match my values, or am I just upset? Am I just sad? Am I mourning something? Am I grieving something? Am I fearful and anxious about something? Those are all really strong possibilities. But I think if we took a look at the values that you're trying to hold in your life for your kids, for your friends, for your spouse, in your own home, and doing what Chante is essentially saying, I think it's okay to like pause and let those things pass and then make a decision.
Right.
Feelings are fluid and they're important because they guide who we are. They help us heal. They help us say, something doesn't feel right about that thing. What you do next, what you do with it really matters. And that's why the self-exploration piece is so, so, so huge. And I would say, look at kids. Like, take a look at kids. Kids are so beautiful in how they interact in the world because they're genuine and they're coming from a place of like curiosity and wonder. And sometimes we learn more from looking at kids and young people. And when I say young people, I mean like under 30, because I'm 40 and I feel very like I am sometimes not the best person to like advise on this. Kids know so much more than we give them credit for, and they come from such like a genuine place. And so, yeah, I think it's just getting back to your roots and knowing what your roots are. Because there are many things that made you and drove you into the direction, drove you to want to have the career you have, drove you to want to have children or not, drove you to want to get married or not, drove you to want to travel or whatever the thing is. Holding on to those pieces of the why is critical and essential. And that's what social workers do. See how I did that? See how I did that? We went all the way back around.
Nice boat. You ended the session. I see that. See? Clinical social worker right there.
Now let's do a grounding exercise to really ground out.
That was something you said at the top made me start thinking about when you, like, is this something that's rooted in my values, or am I just upset and angry? Like, all I could think about was every time there's like some big political event, and I always have to go check people's stories because I'm like, all right, who's on like the right side or wrong side of this? Like, and it's so judgmental of me to do, but like that just gave me like a new frame to look at it through. Like, it's because I'm upset. Like, it's not that being judgmental is in my values. It's not at all, actually. But like, that made me think hardcore.
It's so human, though, Paige.
Right.
We all do it. We all do it. Maybe next time when we're all scrolling and we see something that really just like irks us, we just ask why.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's what, like, I try and be very conscious, especially on social media, about like trying to understand like why something makes me angry. And a lot of times, like, I try very hard to try and pinpoint it, because I don't want to be the, you know, the libbed up, like, irrationally, like, angry in the comments. And like, I try and be very rational, especially on social media, about why am I so upset. And I understand social media is like, it's meant to do that. It is in some ways meant to upset you and keep you engaged. But like, we got to acknowledge it and use it for good.
Well, and it's okay if you need to crash out. Just don't crash out with other people, right? Like, if you need to have a crash out pause, do it. But then come back and say, okay, now that we've had that moment, what do we want to do with this? What do we actually, is this in alignment with what I'm trying to do?
Right. No, absolutely. Well, that is all that I have for you two. Is there anything else that you guys... A whole hour and 15 minutes? Is there anything else that you guys feel like I might have missed?
Next episode should be about why the heck can't we get insurance companies to pay social workers and other therapists fairly? And capitalism. I think you can literally bridge that into any other topic.
That's going to be a 3-hour podcast. Such a girl.
Let's do a series.
That's at least 3 hours.
But I want to just give a quick plug for all the social workers who are running for office right now, especially in Illinois. We're based in Illinois, but Karina Villa, who's running for controller, could you imagine what the state of Illinois could look like with a social worker who is managing our funds? I mean, think about that for a second. I mean, that could look really cool. That could look really effective and non-reactive. Or Karina Santa Maria, who's a social worker in Arlington Heights, who's running for a state Senate seat. We have amazing social workers like Lindsay LaPointe in Chicago and Norma Hernandez. And so I think we have to remember, like, we need more social workers in office. And one thing that you can do, encourage social workers to run for office and elect them. Like, literally vote for them. Just do it. If you see a social worker on the ballot, just vote for them.
Google everybody, say, what does blank candidate do for work? And if it says social worker, you check the box.
Yes.
All right. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Paige, for doing this.
Of course. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Current Affairs Unfiltered. I feel very blessed and lucky to have been able to have that conversation with Chante and Chelsea, and I feel like I walked away with a deeper understanding of, one, what social work is, but two, you know, how we, if you're not a social worker, how we can make sense of what's going on around us. And one of the things that Chante said that really stuck out to me was people thinking that, you know, the government has all these resources and people just like aren't using them the right way. And that's something I'm going to be walking away thinking about, I think, for a while. But if you would like to follow Chante or Chelsea on Instagram, I will have them linked below in the show notes. They are two just amazing women, and I'm honored to now know them both And now that it is January 1st, my Substack is officially live and the first newsletter is up and ready to be viewed and read. So I will have that linked in the show notes as well, and I'm very excited for what becomes of that. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with someone who could use this information. To support this podcast, you can also subscribe to my Substack, She Knows the Score, which is linked in the show notes. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairdsunfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and remember to thank your local social worker. I will see you guys in a few days.